POCO X7 Pro is entering 2025 as the best value mid-range phone, and while it's mainly targeted towards gamers, the company equipped its best gaming phone yet with a 50-megapixel Sony IMX882 sensor, the same camera found on last year's POCO F6, meaning despite being a performance-first device, you can depend on its camera as well. While we wait for the presumed POCO F7 series to be announced for the global market, we're comparing the cameras of the gaming-centric X7 Pro and the jack-of-all-trades POCO F6. But to keep the comparison as fair as possible, unless the photos stated were shot in auto mode with HDR, most of the shots you're going to see were captured in manual mode at full 50 megapixel size with both set to specific white balance and zero auto exposure level. We also set the cameras to adjust exposure based on the entire scene and not just the subject to see how well each maintains the shadows and the highlights. With that said, let's start with outdoor shots. In most cases, the overall quality of the photos is similar if not identical. The most notable difference when you have the photos side by side is tint. Maybe 90% of the time, the F6 leaned towards the magenta side while the X7 Pro leaned towards the greenish or blue side. This is less noticeable when comparing photos with close subjects like these chopsticks. But if you're doing street photography, this is prominent in the highlights like the clouds, skies, and pavements. However, for the most part, the F6 provided photos with better dynamic range, more balanced exposure, and more natural colors. One standout photo though was this green building which favored the X7 Pro because that's the actual color of the building. So not all the time, the F6 would get the best photos. But if there's one obvious thing to point out there, that's contrast. Because of the limited dynamic range, some photos of the X7 Pro look better just like this red building. Because there's more contrast in the shadows, the photo looks more dramatic. This isn't always the case, but when the setting is right, you can get photos that look better than the F6, at least if you favor contrasted shots over a wide dynamic range. Since we're comparing the same 50 megapixel sensors, the detail quality is very similar if not identical. So if it's about which is the sharper camera, it's basically a tie. As far as HDR in auto mode goes, it can go both ways. Sometimes the F6 looked better, other times the X7 Pro looked better. Indoors, where there are multiple sources of lighting, 80% of the time you would get similar photo quality. The F6 appeared slightly brighter at times due to its wider dynamic range, but I would say this is negligible since you don't need a ton of dynamic range indoors. There's one anomaly though. When it comes to subjects that are wide or bright, the X7 Pro blew out my white keyboard as did this earbud. I'm not sure what happened there though. Night mode though is a bit of a toss-up. If anything, the F6 looked less noisy, albeit with similar detail quality as the X7 Pro. But if you're going to bypass night mode and shoot in manual mode, that's where the X7 Pro shined a little bit. As you can see, it exposed my friend's red shirt and his face properly. As for the ultra-wide cameras, both phones use 8-megapixel resolution sensors, but the F6 uses Sony's f2.2 IMX355 while the X7 Pro uses SmartSense with the same aperture. Similar to their respective main cameras, you get the same quirks and tendencies here. However, the X7 Pro almost always gives a brighter look. Also, despite having the same resolution, the F7 has slightly better detail preservation, but only when you pixel peep. When you look at them as a whole photo, you wouldn't even notice it. But that's basically the cameras for the X7 Pro and F6. Objectively, I think the POCO F6 is still better, at least when it comes to photos, which isn't surprising since its target market is people who want a flagship-like phone experience without breaking the bank. However, the improvements to the X7 Pro are not bad at all. Sure, it won't give you the best dynamic range and colors, but what's even a bad photo when you have cameras at this price point that can go toe-to-toe with phones that are aimed at camera users? Let's not forget that this is a performance-centric or gaming-first phone, We haven't even tested the video capabilities yet, but if you want to see a separate video for that, just let me know in the comments section. That's it for this one. Drop a sub or like if you feel like supporting the channel, and as always, until the next one, stay safe.